Little Hand's Big Attitude, Book 1, Chapter 12. Something Not Quite Right.
Had I heard him right? Had Sonic really said that they were going to keep me, and not in the case of a pet or novelty? I couldn't stop myself from crying. In my entire memory, which was long, I couldn't remember a time when someone treated me in such a way before. I was aflame, and power unhindered. Then I was a science experiment, tortured and caged under the constant watchful eye of my captors. And then I was a tormented, rageful force that just wanted to destroy everyone that ever tried to lock me away, or would ever try. I'd never been part of a family before. I grasped Maddie's sleep and sobbed into it. I never wanted to let go of her. I never wanted to let her or Tom or the others out of my sight. They had taken me in, and for weeks I had tried to tell myself it was a trick, that they couldn't actually care about me like they were suggesting. But it was true. It was all true. It took me a few minutes to pull myself together again, but I still gripped her sleeve, snuggling into it and sniffing it. This was the smell of Maddie, my new caretaker, my mother. We entered the house and my nose was met with the smell of wood and spices. Massive wooden beams spanned the ceiling overhead, large stones formed the fireplace, and little decorations of candles and flowers spread across the space added pops of color. It certainly felt welcoming, and Sonic was already plopping himself down on a bar stool and talking a mile a minute to his grandmother. No, our grandmother. It would take some time for me to grow accustomed to that concept. It was still dawning on me. I had a family now, brothers, a mother and a father, and extended family through them. For the first time, not only was I a part of a family, but I had a history of my own. I had a tie to the people of the world I was a part of. I was not just a looming entity that had little to no stake in whether the world itself lived or died anymore. Tails and Knuckles both sat down on the other bar stools. Maddie sat with me at the kitchen table, and Tom immediately went to work helping his mother with something on the counter. Our grandmother then asked them to tell their tale of how Tails and Knuckles had come to be with them. Tails started them off as I also listened, as best I could, at least. Tails came to Earth after discovering Sonic through a power burst he sent off, one that evidently also took out power to a large majority of the country. Tails idolizing Sonic and wanting to be like him wasn't something unusual to me. Most of the Tails throughout time and space had done the same, but it was usually much earlier in the pair's lives than here. Knuckles' part of the story clearly had more than he was willing to admit. He told our grandmother that he had come from a tribe of warriors, and that he was now the last of his kind, following a war. This was a significant difference. While not unknown to me, it was few and far between that the echidnas were ended by war, and not by the hands of their god of destruction Chaos instead. Knuckles' tribe had been ended by a war between them and a group of owls fighting over the Master Emerald. Knuckles said that he came to Earth seeking Sonic, who had been raised by one of the owls, and he believed that Sonic would know where the Master Emerald was. Somehow the two of them and Tails were able to find the Master Emerald, but the exact details seemed to be hidden behind embarrassed looks and comforting glances. Clearly, there had been some bumps in the road leading to that conclusion. Not much could be said about me, at least not that they were aware of. I had quite the tale to tell about how I came to be in the Wachowskis' care, but that would have to wait until I was able to convey it, and even then, they might not even take it seriously. To be honest, it might be best to pretend it had never happened. Sonic then delved into the tale of their latest fight with Dr. Robotnik, complete with sound effects and lots of arm waving. Minor differences in their personalities and histories aside, fundamentally, The three of them were the same adventurous and reckless trio that I had briefly encountered before. After all the chattering and story time was over, the food was taken out of the box and handed out. I latched onto the bottle with a new appreciation for it, so much that Maddie kept taking it from me and telling me to slow down. Sonic still tried to talk with food in his mouth. Tails had clearly abandoned all worries about my grandmother's perception of him and Knuckles. He was still quite tense. I wasn't sure if it was the details of their story he left out that was bothering him or not, but he still sat on the bar stool a little hunched over, his grip on his sandwich a little tighter.
It's nothing. I'm fine.
Knuckles kept telling himself that as if somehow that was going to convince the pain to take a hint and go away. He'd been telling himself that since the afternoon before. It had been just a twinge then, a dull pain that came and went. It had slowly worsened throughout the evening and into the night hours. Not enough for him to express the pain outwardly, but just enough that he was unable to go to sleep. He floated in and out of a light daze, every twinge jolting him back out of it. He couldn't tell the others. He was a warrior. A warrior was not to show weakness or pain, definitely not to his enemies. But he couldn't recall a time when his father had expressed pain or weakness in front of him and the rest of his tribe. He was always strong, unfaltered by such things. Knuckles wanted to become strong. Besides, this had happened before, and it faded out within a day or so. He just had to ride it out. He ate his sandwich and then quietly wandered the living room while the adults cleaned up lunch. He held Obsidian in his arms, looking at the old photographs on the wall and side table. Photos of Tom when he was a child, of him and Maddie when they were teenagers, and a photo of what Knuckles recognized as his parents' wedding.
Crazy, isn't it?
Knuckles looked up as Grandma Maggie came up to him. The woman took the photo of Tom as a toddler up into her hands with a smile.
They grow up so fast. One day they're tiny and learning to walk, and the next they're getting married and having 4 little ones of their own.
Humans can grow up in only one day?
No, not really. But it can certainly feel that way.
Hey Knuckles, we're gonna go practice our pitches and swings out in the field. Wanna come?
Come on, your mom and I can keep an eye on the baby.
Knuckles looked to her and then gave a nod, handing Obsidian off to her, then heading out the door after his brothers. The makeshift ball field appeared to have been there for quite some time, long before Sonic started coming here. Tufts of tall grass poked up around the bases, the ground compacted and dusty from years of feet running across it.
Why does this place have its own field?
Well, before they remodeled the field in town and when I played baseball back in junior high, the team came out here to the field to practice. Lots of space to run, not many windows to worry about.
So long as nobody missed a pitch.
Tails added, pointing to the farmhouse behind them and waving back at Maddie and Grandma Maggie, who were watching from the front porch.
Alright, Knuckles, we're doing pitching first. Batter up.
Knuckles collected the wooden bat from its place, coming up to the plate and crouching carefully. He gritted his teeth as another pang hit him, but he hid it behind a look of determination.
Okay, you gotta actually hit the ball with the bat this time, Knuckles. No power bumping it into Kentucky.
Give me your best shot, Hedgehog.
Sonic grinned mischievously, and then the ball came flying at the echidna. Knuckles swung hard, but the ball whizzed past him.
Strike one.
You got this, sweetie.
Knuckles nodded as Sonic collected another ball from the bucket beside him. Another pitch, another swing. Crack! The ball was sent flying into the air out of sight.
Nice one, Knuckles.
Knuckles smirked, but it wavered as another pang hit him and his legs buckled a little.
You're good, Knuckles.
The echidna reset himself, brow furrowing.
Merely a slight crab. I am fine.
Carl sat on his back porch, peering out into the darkness of the woods. Of course, the sheriff and deputy didn't take him seriously. He didn't have proof. They only accepted that the little blue devil was real when they'd seen him for themselves. And even then, some of the townsfolk tried to convince themselves it wasn't. It was all in their heads. For a while. Carl knew that the best way to prove something was solid evidence, and the best way to get evidence was to catch the darn thing. The hardest part was going to be luring them back out into range. They'd made off with the shoes, and he didn't know what else he could use as bait, but somehow, he knew that it would come back eventually. Suddenly, multiple tripwires went off as something scrambled across the ground, and the man was off. The amount of rustling and leaves behind the scattered told him it was too big to be a raccoon, and far too fast for the man to get the flashlight beams on it long enough to get a good look at it. Brief flashes of color, a random foot or tail before ducking into the darkness again. He gave chase through the dark, dodging any other traps and tripwires as it hurried towards the creek that ran along the back of his property. Whatever devil this was, it was agile too. He reached the creek as he heard a splash, and the rustling stopped. He looked around and moved the beam around. It had to be here somewhere. It was very quiet now, only the sound of the creek running down the slope and the wind rustling the branches. He searched the treetops but saw nothing. He'd lost it again. He marched back towards his cabin only to find the light inside was off. He never left the light off when he left his cabin, so people might assume he was still there. He rushed up to the door and flung it open, flipping on the light and looking around for any movement. Once more it was quiet, but boxes had been overturned, cabinets and chests left open, and drawers pulled out and emptied of their contents. Someone had been frantically looking for someone. The old hunter growled. Now there were two blue devils, one going off and sending him on a wild goose chase, and one using that distraction to loot his belongings. He began to collect the items and return them to their proper place, and by the time he was finished, he was somewhat relieved that it appeared nothing was taken. Whatever they'd been looking for, they hadn't found it. He'd catch them next time. It was only a matter of time.